This video contains strong adult language, may not be suitable for children or sensitive people. Boom boom.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Jameis Winston's 30 for 30 season in 2019. Ah yes, Jameis Winston's famous season. Winston became the first quarterback in NFL history to throw 30 touchdowns and 30 interceptions in a single season, epitomizing his erratic play. Despite his obvious talent and love of crab legs, Winston's carelessness with the ball doomed the Bucs' chances of competing, leading to their 7-9 finish. What's crazy is Winston could have done better had he had LASIK. It also blew his mind when he found out Bruce Arians was white. This frustrating season signaled the end of the Winston era and paved the way for Tom Brady's arrival and a Super Bowl. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers. For the Bucs, it has to be their 26th consecutive loss, which happened on December 4th, 1977. It cannot get worse than that for a franchise where decades later, we're still talking about how shit you were back then. The Bucs lost 10-0 that day, the sixth time they had been shut out that season. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, 1976. The Bucs' inaugural season was a disaster, finishing 0-14 and setting the standard for hopelessness. Head coach John McKay famously joked about the team's execution, saying he was in favor of it. The defense was terrible, and the offense blocked about as well as Twitter does now. Expansion teams are always expected to struggle, but the Bucs took it to the extreme, like a vandal rocking the mic. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Oh, you won the division? Congrats on winning an ugly contest. You're gonna get bent over by the Commanders in the first round as they plunder your booty. How on earth did you get swept by the Falcons? You replaced a bakery with a baker. Trust me, he'll serve up a turnover when the time is right. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs have 2 Super Bowl wins, but most fans agreed Rondé Barber in 2003 to seal the win versus the Eagles in the NFC Championship game was the most iconic. The Eagles were down 10 late in the fourth quarter and needed some points in order to have a chance. However, Rondé had other ideas. The Bucs would go on to beat the Raiders in the Super Bowl. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Oh, bringing in all those expatriates to win a Super Bowl, those weren't smart decisions. Remember that time your team went 0-26 and your coach was the most amusing thing about the squad?
You can't stop a pass or a run. Otherwise, we're in great shape.
And back then your logo was gay and so were the colors. That's not funny.
Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Well, folks, it's time for another year of Is Your Team the Worst Winning Percentage Team in NFL History? And guess what? The Buccaneers have won it again. They are 32nd all-time in win percentage. And I feel like people who are Buccaneers fans, they know that. So that's not really triggering per se, although it should be because literally team sucks. Figuratively, but in recent years, the Buccaneers have actually been very, very talented. But for most of your franchise, that's what happens when you start 0-26. Anyway, the biggest thing, again, it's always what do Buccaneers fans hold near and dear to their hearts? And Mike Evans is the answer there. Mike Evans, everybody who's a Buccaneers fan holds Mike Evans near and dear to their heart because he has his 1,000-yard season streak at 11. He's caught over 100 touchdowns. He's a great player. We all understand that. He's probably going to be in the Hall of Fame someday. He should have. Devin Hester is. But the thing about Mike Evans is he's never been a quote-unquote dominant receiver, which to me is more important than having longevity as a receiver. It's kind of like Frank Gore, who I just talked about with 49ers segment, has all the counting stats and will be in the Hall of Fame, but it's like I can't really remember a dominant performance by Frank Gore. I can't remember a famous run by Frank Gore, even though he has all the stats. What I was going to say was Mike Evans has just 2 of the top 200 receiving yard seasons ever in NFL history, despite having 1,000 yards in every single season. If you look at his season close, there was one year he had 1,001 yards. There was another year 1,006 yards. This year he had 1,004 yards. So he's a bit of a stat patter. He's into the stat, so there's been a couple years there where he's been literally within 5 or 6 yards of not getting 1,000 yards. His best season ever in terms of receiving yard is 47th on the all-time receiving yards list in a single season, so not even in the top 45. He's a very good player. You can even say he's a great player, but he's not in that Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, Terrell Owens, Calvin Johnson class, not even close. The biggest position of need for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers is the wide receiver position, especially since Chris Godwin is going to be coming off of a serious injury. Now, if Godwin Godwin was healthy, then this wouldn't be the biggest need. But also Mike Evans, you know, he got his 1,000-yard streak continuing, caught over 11 touchdown passes. So you got a good number one receiver in Mike Evans. But after that, it's kind of like, well, who do we have here? Jalen McMillan is still unproven, although he had 8 touchdown catches last year. Baker Mayfield loves throwing to his running backs, you know, Rashad White and Bucky Irving, but they could use another receiver, especially with Mike Evans getting older, and especially with Chris Godwin coming off of a serious injury. Tampa Bay Buccaneers. While Bobby Wagner and Russell Wilson is pretty good, it doesn't get much better than nailing 2 Hall of Fame picks in your first 2 picks in the same draft, which is what the Buccaneers did in '95, and both on the same side of the ball, with Warren Sapp and Derek Brooks. Sapp was a 7-time Pro Bowler and a 4-time first-team All-Pro, also a Defensive Player of the Year. Derek Brooks was an 11-time Pro Bowler and a 5-time first-team All-Pro, and also a Defensive Player of the Year in 2002, and they were obviously a huge reason why the Buccaneers and their legendary defense were able to win it all in 2002, and they're also a huge reason why, and as well as with other players like John Lynch and Rondé Barber and some other great defensive players, Simeon Rice, that the Buccaneers became one of the most feared defenses in the league for the better part of a decade in the late 90s, early 2000s. Although the rest of the draft doesn't have much after Derek Brooks, when you draft 2 of the best defensive players ever in the same draft, you make the list. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Alvin Harper, 1995. This was in the early days of free agency, and Harper had been a great second option on some Super Bowl champion winning Cowboys teams, and the Buccaneers at this point thought that, hey, we got a young quarterback in Trent Dilfer who's going to be our franchise guy moving forward. Let's give him some help. So let's dish out a shitload of cash, which is what they did, which again, 4 years, $10.6 million, might not sound like a lot now for a receiver, but back in '95, it was breaking the bank. And what the Buccaneers got in return for Harper was 2 seasons and 3 touchdowns and a lot of losing. So yes, Alvin Harper was a terrible signing. You don't know how badly I wish I could say Tom Brady here, but unfortunately, you know, he did do okay in Tampa, and Alvin Harper was worse. So I have to go with Alvin Harper based on integrity. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Todd Bowles. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, a couple years ago, I thought Bowles was going to be fired for sure, and I thought that Baker Mayfield was going to be dog shit, but somehow the Buccaneers and Bowles have gotten better actually every year since he took over. Isn't it weird? Gee, I wonder who the quarterback was in his first year when they had the worst record under Todd Bowles thus far. Certainly couldn't be a guy considered the greatest of all time, right? Either way, Bowles can have his job still thanks largely to the resurgence of Baker Mayfield. Let's be real. Although I will say that the Buccaneers are still considered to be kind of a mediocre team that just plays in a shitty division, which is pretty true. Their offense was actually really, really good last year, and Mayfield was really, really good. So the fact that they went one and done in the playoffs at home versus Washington was considered a disappointment. So I do think there is actually some heat back on Todd Bowles once again, but I think he and Mayfield have developed somewhat of a rapport together, and the Bucs have kind of found some stability. So I actually think his hot seat ranking, maybe I'm being too kind here, I think his hot seat ranking is 2 out of 5 at the moment. But again, I could be wrong, and if the Buccaneers completely fall out and they go like 4-13, he might get the axe, but I'm gonna bet that it doesn't happen. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Yaya Diaby. Oh yeah, baby, that's right. Diaby was a 3rd-round pick in 2023, and after a rookie season where he finished 5th in Defensive Rookie of the Year voting, on the surface, his numbers seemed to take a bit of a drop-off last year. He went from 7.5 sacks as a rookie to 4.5 sacks last season. But it's worth noting, as a rookie, he had just 8 quarterback hits, but as a sophomore, he had 20. What that means is that he got into the backfield less times as a rookie, but he capitalized more often, leading to a higher sack total. But even though he had a lower sack total in his sophomore season, he was consistently generating more pressure, hence more quarterback hits. He won the Defensive Player of the Week last year late in the season. He's an absolute freak athlete, 6'4", 270-pound outside linebacker. This is a guy that the one thing that's really stopping the Buccaneers from becoming contenders is their defense. And last year, their defense wasn't very good. The year before that, it wasn't very good either. If Diaby breaks out into becoming an all-pro type player, then the Buccaneers could be a team to watch to lose to the Eagles in the NFC Championship game next year. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Lavonte David. Lavonte David has been in the league since Aaron Hernandez was playing for the Patriots. Yes, that is a true fact. He's had a phenomenal career. In fact, he leads all current players in career solo tackles with over 1,100. He has 1,600 total tackles. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been a Pro Bowler. He's been an All-Pro. He's been a second-team All-Pro a couple times, and he still has some juice left in the tank, but I kind of just picked him by default. It was either him or Mike Evans, and I just decided to go with David because the Buccaneers defense wasn't great last year, and I feel like, you know, for every great player. I don't know if he'll be a Hall of Famer. He's kind of in that kind of London Fletcher type of tier where, you know, they're borderline Hall of Famers, and I think he could be there with his consistency and his durability. But at a certain point, I think every player hits the wall no matter how great they are, except for Tom Brady, for some reason, fucking Antichrist. But I think it's time for David. I think he's getting a little bit up there in age, but he still is a big name. Still a good player, but I don't think he's the great player that he was for most of his career. Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Baker Mayfield. Whirlwind career, he proved that Tom Brady was, in fact, replaceable in Tampa Bay, which is a very heroic deed. And people are going to say, oh, but Tom Brady won a Super Bowl in Tampa Bay. Yeah, a pandemic ring. Nobody really cares about that shit, okay? If you're going to say that the Lakers ring doesn't count because of the bubble and the pandemic ring, then you have to say the Buccaneers ring in 2020 where there's no fans, and they had 3 road playoff games where no fans were in the stands, and they got to play at home, right, in the Super Bowl. Then that ring doesn't count. And Baker's stats with the Buccaneers are very, very similar to Brady's stats with the Buccaneers. He's fun to watch. He takes no prisoners, right? But he still will kill you with the turnovers, but that's kind of why he's fun to watch. He threw, I think, 16 interceptions last year. He's not boring, basically. I've always been a fan of Baker's style of play, so I'm glad that he's turned it around. He's won 2 playoff games. His playoff numbers are great, but he still has never made a conference championship game. But I think, personally, that he and the team around him, the Bucs, they're good enough, and they play in a bad enough division where they can get to the conference championship game. But I also think that this is about as good of a situation as he's ever going to be in, so the time to strike is now. Strike while the iron is hot, you know? And again, out of all the teams in the NFC in recent history that have given the Eagles massive issues, it's been the Buccaneers. So that's another thing. If he can get the Bucs to the playoffs again and they have to face the Eagles, that's like the one team where I'm like, you know what? They've had our number in recent history. And the Bucs were really the only team last year that defeated the Eagles handily. So again, the Buccaneers are kind of like the one team in the NFC. It's all about matchups. Styles make fights. The Buccaneers are the one team in the NFC, honestly, that kind of scares me a bit as an Eagles fan based on recent history. His prove it rating, 6.5 out of 10.
When a man's at his lowest, you see his true character. Does he crumble under the pressure and break down from the spotlights? Does he lash out at everyone within earshot? Does he deflect blame and throw people under the bus? Does he become the equivalent of the Joker and no one knows what to expect? Or does he find it within himself to grind further? Does he feed on that adversity? Does it make him reflect and grow as a player? Does it harden like clay in a kiln? In the case of Baker Mayfield, he's had a fascinating career arc, going from the golden son of a long-cursed franchise to an exile pariah and everything in between. The tale of not only being in hell, but embracing it while ascending to a new echelon. This is a comeback for the ages. This is Baker's revival. Last time we left off on Mayfield, he had been cast off from Cleveland in favor of an adult at QB. Betrayed by his superiors for playing injured for a good chunk of the season. What was seen as a disastrous 2021 campaign was the perfect excuse for the Browns to move on. Be exiled to a place with their own quarterback troubles. Carolina. The Panthers needed someone to right their ship. Anyone. Things had been going sideways in a hurry since Cam left the first time. Baker would be given every opportunity to thrive. His first opponent would be the perfect one. The Browns. Baker Mayfield against Jacoby Brissett. Deshaun Watson was serving a suspension for the first part of the year. Things didn't start out too well. The Panthers were struggling. They were down 20-7 at the start of the fourth quarter. But then Baker did what he usually does. Push forward and overcome the odds. Suddenly the Browns go from controlling the game to being on the ropes on the back of Baker to Robbie Chosen. 75 yards of pay dirt almost felt perfect. Baker getting sweet revenge, guiding his team down the field repeatedly and even getting them the lead late in the game. But life is cruel, and it tends to be very unfair.
York to try to win the game. The kick. Oh, look at this. There's the distance, and Cade York wins it for Cleveland.
Revenge would not be granted. There was more suffering to endure. It did not go well for Mayfield in Carolina. He struggled mightily, and that's putting it nicely. His haters were being proven right. He couldn't carry a team to relevance on his own. He couldn't stay healthy enough to be consistent. And even when he was healthy, the results were miserable. Although in hindsight, a lot of it probably had more to do with the disaster class that was Matt Rule's offense. Baker didn't fit it at all. Their offensive line was god-awful. Mayfield was running for his life, being overseen by an offensive coordinator that never liked him. And that was before they traded away Christian McCaffrey. He tried to stay positive and upbeat during the ordeal, but once Rule got canned, his days were numbered. After an awful showing against the Ravens, everyone knew it wasn't working. They wanted to give chances to P.J. Walker and Sam Darnold. Baker was on the outs, requesting his release, and it was granted. Cast off on waivers to anyone willing to take him on. His career in limbo. But there was a bit of luck involved. The Rams, despite their Super Bowl success, were dealing with their own miserable year of injury and impotence. It started with them dying like the Queen to the Bills on opening night and just got worse from there. Matthew Stafford, like Baker in Cleveland, was playing hurt. His throwing elbow was in bad shape. But with the season spiraling out of control, Stafford suffered another ailment to his spinal cord. Shut down to rest and recover for future campaigns. LA was down to John Wolford and Bryce Perkins under center. They just needed a placeholder to man the fort until the year mercifully ended. Baker Mayfield's a significantly better option than the fodder available. He's good enough for the job. And his first test would come fast. 2 days after being claimed, as a matter of fact. A daunting task for any player headed into a new system, but even more so for a quarterback. Remember Kendall Hinton back in 2020? That's the average go for this kind of situation. Fortunately, the Raiders weren't exactly the hardest opponent to face. Under the leadership of Josh McSnake, Las Vegas was going through their own turmoil. Their offense was an absolute mess. And it showed throughout this contest. The Rams were without Aaron Donald, and the Raiders could still do nothing for drives at a time. Derek Carr was about to be castigated by the current regime, and games like this were their reason why. The opportunity was there. Give it enough time, even with this makeshift offense, Las Vegas would bend. And it would bend to Mayfield. Seriously, it was pretty much him and him alone. The majesty of Thursday Night Football on full display. Throwing to the likes of Tutu Atwell, Ben Skoranek, and Van Jefferson. A proving ground all its own. It wasn't exactly much, but some say miracles can happen.
2nd and 10. Mayfield to the end zone to Jefferson. Is that possible? Touchdown.
This game saved his career. Going from a guy who some wondered if he was even going to get another crack at a starting job to engineering one of the better drives in his recent memory. With some assistance to Jerry Tillery and Amik Robertson, of course. The Raiders' complete embarrassment was Baker's finest hour in years. And while the rest of his season wasn't anything outstanding, you must remember the Rams were completely undermanned. Baker needed a chance to get his confidence back. And with McVay and the Rams, he got that swagger to return. If it weren't for them, Mayfield might be mired in the UFL right now. Even then, would it be enough to get him another look? LA was always a temporary stop. Matthew Stafford's job was never in question. Baker would be a free agent again. And there was an intriguing option looking for a new quarterback. Tampa Bay was another team that had experienced Super Bowl success, but Tom Brady was never meant to be a long-term option. He hung them up after a disappointing 2022 by his standards, but we never believed. Especially after the previous year's shenanigans. So far, Brady is still retired. We must remain ever vigilant of his return, however, in the ownership ranks. Sorry for the tangent, but that being said, the Buccaneers needed a quarterback. Kyle Trask was a project QB, but not a sure thing. So why not give Baker a call and offer him a prove-it deal? It's extremely low risk. If he doesn't work out, you have a deep quarterback class in the next draft. Remember, Baker was never guaranteed the starting job. He had to compete in camp and prove himself. The thing to realize is that Mayfield was familiar with this scenario. Look back to his high school days. Mayfield was never a blue chipper. He was a 3-star prospect overlooked by big-time colleges. Too small, too unorthodox of a style, not talented enough to thrive. Scholarship offers only by the likes of Florida Atlantic, New Mexico, and Rice. Yet he had the chip on his shoulder. He wanted to stay in Texas, but Rice wasn't his destination. It was Texas Tech. As a walk-on. Even if his college years had red flags, Baker embraced his fate as the underdog. He did it with the Red Raiders, he did it at Oklahoma, and he had to do it again. Headed into camp, he'd show the world that Cleveland made a mistake, easily beating Trask out for the starting game. And after that, he ran with the opportunity.
Mayfield looking for Evans. He's got him. Touchdown!
3rd and long. Mayfield off his back foot. Wants Mike Evans. Got Mike Evans. Touchdown Tampa.
All of a sudden it's 3rd and 9. Baker's going to try and run for it. And Baker Mayfield crosses midfield.
35 seconds. Mayfield to the end zone. It is caught. Otten. Touchdown.
The Buccaneers had found their new quarterback. Being mired in the 4-7 quandary of mediocrity was a rallying cry for something greater. Rattling off win after win with smooth, efficient play. A nightmare performance at Lambeau was avenged with the first perfect passer rating by an opposing QB there. Guiding Tampa Bay to win 5 of 6 and steal the NFC South in the middle of the night. You can argue their division was a complete joke and the only playoff caliber team in that run with the Packers, but Tampa Bay did what they had to do. Any doubters would be warded off in the wild card at the hands of a collapsing Eagles squad. Built to ass in front of an excited home crowd.
Then again, the Eagles had no secondary or linebacking core to speak of. And their defensive coordinator was Matt Patricia. He makes a lot of offenses look good.
Even if Tampa's season would come to an end thanks to Detroit, things looked bright again for the Bucs. Their short search was over. Baker embraced Tampa Bay, and the city embraced him back. The Bucs refused to make the same mistake Cleveland did. He was rewarded. Baker recouped a chunk of the money lost by playing injured in 2022. Why mess with a contending formula? Mayfield meshes well with their offense. He has tremendous chemistry with Mike Evans. He's beloved by both the fans and his teammates. Mayfield has become their long-term option. 2024 was a lot more of the same in terms of performance. He's a two-time Pro Bowler in the red and black. He's not among the elite of the quarterback hierarchy, but he has led Tampa Bay to a playoff win. It would have been two of them if Jaden Daniels wasn't God himself. If Todd Bowles wasn't as conservative as the Amish. Even if the Browns forced a setback, his next extension will more than reward him for his previous trouble.
Oh yeah, his old flame in the Browns. As for Cleveland,
in regards to that mega deal they gave their much ballyhooed adult at QB, well,
let's say Deshaun's more than successfully united Browns fans in celebration.
When he tore his Achilles in a game. And then when he retore it a few months later.
One of the biggest mistakes in franchise history. Browns? This shit is Tuesday to them.
You have to think Baker has some form of satisfaction regarding this, right? It's a classic tale of redemption. Now the question lies as if he can lead a team further. That was always the criticism about him. Despite Mayfield putting up the best statistical performance of his career last year, he threw the most picks in the league. There lies Baker's next challenge. If there's one thing he's used to, it's being overlooked. He's channeled his cockiness and swagger into a manageable fan-favorite formula. He's proven himself as a leader in the locker room. He's become an adult under center. Kind of ironic, don't you think? He was constantly derided for his immaturity and long-term sustainability, but those have long been quenched. Whether that be by his humbling or the chip on his shoulder is up to the eye of the beholder. The bow to Baker has gone from tragedy to triumph. I wonder where the story goes from here. Does it lead to a ring? Or more modest success? The NFL doesn't care for happy endings. It's an unforgiving league. Mayfield knows that firsthand.